episode 3 of the Corner Coaching Chronicles. I'm Alex. This is Nathan, back yet again. Nathan, as I ask you every single week, how was this week in drafts?
So just in full transparency for everybody, I had a extended family vacation and a very busy work week, so there's been a little less drafts. Mm-hmm. So as a result, I've bumped down to like silver status, and so the drafts haven't been going. I don't want to say great, but I've been confused as to what the actual to do in the draft session. But the gameplay itself, I think, is, I'm not sitting in diamond or platinum, so the gameplay's gotten a little more rudimentary. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm winning despite my drafting skills, not because of my drafting and gameplay skills. So I think this week it might make sense just to take a step back from gameplay and focus on a couple of drafts or one draft that I had particular challenges with.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think, one of the funny things, too, is we're pretty deep in the format, and you might think that means that draft navigation becomes easier because you're like, oh, I understand what's going on now. But I actually think at this part in the format, things become harder a lot of the time because everybody knows what's up, right? So you're like, you don't get these streamlined 2-color decks all that often anymore where it's just like, oh, Silver Cool is open, clearly, I'm just going to go into it. So yeah, I think draft navigation at this point in the format is potentially even more interesting than it was at the beginning. So yeah, I'm excited to jump in. All right, here we are in our draft, and well, we have kind of a not very exciting pack for a pick one, pack one. I'm curious what you thought about this pack.
So I have not played with Jadzi, I think that's how you say it, before, but I've played against it. 8 mana just seemed like a ton.
Yeah.
I really wasn't sold on that, so I was looking at the rest of the pack to say, like, what do I really like here? I had narrowed it down to strategic planning and the Pledge Mage, honestly. And so I landed on the Pledge Mage, but I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, not the most exciting pack in the world. So yeah, Jadzi I think is just like a huge trap. At this point in the format, we have some pretty good numbers from 17 lands, but also I know DraftSim did an analysis on a bunch of games and drafts of the format, and Jadzi is just like a horrendous win rate, basically.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just like not good at all. So don't just ignore the card. You will be better off for it. Past that though, yeah, I like planning, especially because it goes well with like Serpentine Curve. Pledge Mage is a fine card too. I think if it was if I have to narrow it in between 2 cards, it might actually be between Pledge Mage and Academic Probation for me. I actually think this is a decent lesson. I think it's one of the more underrated lessons. Now, I'm not often happy to first pick it, but out of a pretty weak pack, I think those would be the 2 things that are close for me. This was just like, one of the things with lessons that the narrow ones are still pretty darn good, like, because you're only going to get them when they're good for you. So just being able to go like, okay, guiding voice my creature, say that creature can't block, is often pretty powerful for 2 mana. So I think either of them is fine. And so, if you take the Pledge Mage, I'll give you an agree for that. All right. Moving on to pack 2 here. Again, not the most exciting pack, but we got a few better ones than the last one.
Yeah. So staying on color, emergent sequence that I was looking at. Cram session for the learn, or I just took a step back and thought, what do I think is the best card here? What have I been playing a lot of, and that's been black white, and so I took the Combat Professor.
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable too. So the 2 cards in this pack that I think are in the conversation are Combat Professor and Emergent Sequence. Going back to that data I was talking about, one of the things that has become, it's shown, that data shown, is that Emergent Sequence is like such a top tier green card. The times when you have that card in your opening hand the games go very different when you have that card in your opening hand, basically. So this is very close because I think that Combat Professor goes in better decks than Emergent Sequence. I tend to like the white decks a little bit better than the green decks. This obviously goes with your first pick a little bit better. So I think either of them is fine here. So yeah, I would be okay with you taking Combat Professor and kind of staying open a little bit longer. But I don't know how high you had Emergent Sequence kind of like in your head, but it's like I said, it's like way up there for me if you are drafting a green deck.
Going back to our previous episodes, focusing on learn, I probably would have taken Cram Session over it because I don't have a lot of experience with it. So that's good to know that it's I need to taking a lesson from our previous season, I need to start analyzing the 17 lands data again. I've kind of let that study lapse a little bit, and I think that would have helped me here.
I feel like there's always a class of cards in in most formats that are like, you should just take these because they're very, very good. Learn Lesson, the MDFCs from Zendikar, right? Like some snow payoffs in Kaldheim. There's just like a certain bar where it's like, if there's nothing fantastic in the pack, you should probably just take this type of card, right? And I think what's really important after you've identified what that type of card is, in whatever format, the cards you take over those cards, right? Because it's very easy to fall into the like, oh, of course I take the lesson card or the learn cards. Like I've heard those cards are so good, but then there's just that tier above. Mind you, there's not that many cards in that tier generally, but yeah, knowing what cards are in that tier I think is really important for navigating the early parts of a draft. All right, so we take Combat Professor. Totally fine. I'll give you an agree on that one, and we move on.
I think you've beat into my head that I really need to take environmental sciences when I see it. And I've had drafts where I haven't seen it again, so I snagged it here.
We didn't pass the sciences this time.
We did not. No, we made it.
A+, thumbs up. You passed the test this time. Move on to a fourth pick, Conspiracy Theorist, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it was interesting enough for me to take it. I didn't see any other cards here that were pulling me in a particular direction, so I thought, Quandrix Pledge Mage is their first pick. It's a pretty weak first pick in terms of what we were looking for.
Yeah.
Red-white, I can go aggro, it can go long, so let's go there. Yeah,
I really love what you just said there, actually, about like, I first picked the Quandrix Pledge Mage, but like, that's not that great. It's fine, but I'm not at all tied to that. And I think that one of the things that I mentioned on the podcast this week, I was talking about pivoting and signals and stuff like that. That was the big picture topic. And, one of the big picture things when you think about that is the stronger your start, the less you want to branch out into other colors and kind of speculate. The weaker you start, the more you want to be able to just be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna take the good cards that come to me because my start isn't all that enticing. So we'll just see what comes to me. And yeah, I really like Conspiracy Theorist. I think that card's like just like super underrated. It gets passed, to me more often than I think it should. And yeah, I totally agree with snapping it up here.
I think this might be a first that we've got 4 agrees.
Nice. That's awesome. 4 agrees.
I don't think we'll stay that way, but
how many you want to take a bet on how many we can go before we break the
let me look ahead a little bit.
What's the over under on?
I don't think it's gonna be many more.
All right. Well, we'll see. So we move on to this back here.
Honestly, I really wasn't sure. We're already kind of a little all over the place, but there's no real lore hold card here that I really wanted to snag. Mage Duel looked tempting. I'm like, again, I haven't been playing as plugged into the format as I usually am, but that traditionally card has been good when I've played against it or with it. Mm-hmm. But I haven't really had a chance to play with Creative Outburst, and I really wanted to give that a try, so I took that.
Yeah, so I will give this. We already, we jinxed it. I will give this one a mistake. I think just because I like this card. I actually think it's kind of funny. Went on a bit of a roller coaster where I think people overrated it. Then people were like really trashing it, and I think they underrated it for a bit. I think it's still a little bit underrated. I like a copy of the card in my Prismari decks. Just like dealing fire to the face is nice. Killing anything. Often in your Prismari decks you want to end the game with like a burst finish where it's like, cast my spell, attack you with my Pledge Mage and my Flyer or whatever, deal 5 to the face. That plays a role there. But all that being said, I think Prismari Pledge Mage is just too important. Just locking in that good 2 in Prismari. There's not very many of them, so just lock it in there. And it's definitely the less exciting pick, but I think it's the one that just fits what the deck needs. And that's one of those kind of picks where it's like, if you're not aware that there's just like a lack of good 2s in blue or red, it's going to be easy to pass on that one.
Yeah, we flagged that in the previous podcast or a previous episode, to be honest. So,
right, yeah,
and it would have kept us on the lore hold train. So,
well, it's it's kind of funny because I see Prismari Pledge Mage as mostly just a blue-red card because if you're playing it in a Quandrix deck, a blue-green deck, or a red-white deck, it's not really as much of a 2-drop, right? Because you're not going to have, it's harder to have red on turn 2. Yeah. So it's like a hard to cast 2-drop or like a awkward 4-drop or however you want to put it. So I don't think you actually gain that much flexibility by taking Pledge Mage there, but I do think it's important enough that I would take it. All right, moving on. What do we see?
Again, another pack that I was a little befuddled on what to take.
Yeah.
Kind of waffling back and forth. We only have the one Prismari card. We only have the one blue-green. What's the name of that one again? Quandrix card. So I went with Pilgrim of the Ages. I've had good results with that and sticks with like the lore hold.
Yeah. So I think this is fine too. So basically the 2 cards out of this pack that I would take are either Pilgrim or Frost Trickster. And, either one of them is fine. This plays more into the blue-red plan. This plays more into like the red-white plan. And to be honest, at this point in the draft, I'm not super happy with the direction I'm going. Not to say like I have agreed with a lot of the things you've taken so far, but I think blue red and white red are 2 decks that I'm not unhappy about, but I have to. There's a higher threshold of good cards in my deck. There has to be a higher threshold of like, I've got a lot of good cards for me to be happy, because I think they're just weaker decks than the other decks in the format, basically. Like, if you have a really good white aggro start and you just go into lower hold, like you've got all the good white aggressive cards, that's totally fine, right? It's almost like a Silver Quill deck with some red cards. But if you're mostly red, in going into, and playing a lower hold deck that's mostly red, that's where I'm a little bit iffy. Now, of course, your 2 best cards here are, so I guess not your 2 best, but 2 of your good cards here are going to be Combat Prof and Pilgrim. Those are 2 good white cards. But as far as big picture, where this draft is going, I'm kind of like a little bit here and there. So if I'm deciding between the 2 options, blue-red or white-red, I actually do like the Pilgrim because I like white-red a little bit more than blue-red at this point in the format. So
just a conceptual thing, like,
yeah,
you've agreed. That was an agree, right?
Yeah.
So you've agreed with 5 of the 6 picks.
Yeah.
The only difference would be you would have the 2-drop, the Pledge Mage over the Creative Outburst. Like, what do you do differently? Like, you just kind of ride the wave here? Like,
yeah, you kind of.
You said you're not happy, but
yeah, that's a great question. You kind of just ride the wave. I would try my best to get as deep into white as I can, pick up white cards when I can, just because they are better than the red cards generally. And it's kind of tricky because in the natural way you would maybe want to draft this seat in a lot of other formats where you're like red, white, blue, you'd want to draft red cards because then you could be red, blue, or red, white, right? But a big picture thought on this format at this point for me is that I think red is actually pretty bad. Its commons are just very weak. Heated Debate is a fine card, but it's nothing special. There's a lot of good removal spells in the format, and then the rest of red commons are like kind of junky, right? So I guess for me conceptually, where I am trying to move this draft is just get deeper into white and be like a white-red deck if that comes down to it, or even if the opportunity presents itself, move into black-white. Maybe black-white's open pack 2. I'm okay with jumping into that, kind of sniping the black-white cards from maybe the person who's in black-white next to me in pack 1 that was sniping all the good black cards or whatever. That being said, if I just happen to get past a bunch of like great gold cards in red-white or great gold cards in blue-red, that's fine. I'm happy with that as well. But again, it's about that. I want to have a certain level of good cards in my deck to be happy with my blue-red deck or to be happy with my white-red deck, basically.
Got it. That's good. Yeah. No, I mean, we could put that to point here, right? Like, I was trying to choose between Defiant Strike, the Stormkill artist, or the Waterfall Aerialist. I really wasn't looking at much else there. I know there's a lesson there. I didn't really look at it to be transparent. So I went with the Stormkill artist, but I think if you were trying to get deeper into white, you might land on the Defiant Strike, or if you're probably going to tell me you would take the lesson.
Yeah, you know it's coming. Yeah,
I knew it was coming.
Here. Yeah, basically at the end of the draft, almost in any deck, I want one copy of all the colorless lessons if I can have them. Right, Intro to Prophecy, Intro to Annihilation, Sciences, Expanded Anatomy. I think they're all quite good. I think having access to them is quite important. right? And these cards are kind of just like fillery. Defiant Strike is good with like Reflective Golem and stuff, and and that's like the one, or like you have a bunch of Magecraft triggers, but it's not that exciting basically. And I think that intro is just a really solid card, and I'd be pretty happy to take it here. All right, we get to this pack, and okay, this is pretty big. Divide by 0 this late is definitely means something.
I mean, Insta Snap took it. That's kind of shocking to me.
Totally agree with that. That's a great pickup here. We move on to pick 9.
So this is on the wheel. The strategic planning came back, and so I snagged that.
Oh, interesting. So okay, so this is pretty... I would take the land here. I would take Prismari Campus just because it's really important, I think, to have like 1 or 2 campuses just so you don't end up not, being in the situation where you have none. And like having no scry lands is pretty painful, I think, in any deck. Like even in my Silver Cool decks, I want them. And then even if my deck wants to go a little bit longer, wants to get into the late game, it's pretty painful to not have one of those. I think that would change for me, and I would take strategic planning if I had a Serpentine Curve or 2 in my pile already. I think that's enough to change my pick there. But without that, planning's fine. But I would just lock in the campus here.
Is this a mistake or a disagree?
I would say it is a disagree because I could argue that this strategic planning is good for the future for potentially picking up Serpentine Curve, right? Because if you take this here, then Serpentine Curve gets a bit more appealing when you see that later in packs too. So I would say disagree.
It's Serpentine Curve because you're going to put 2 more instants, or putting like potentially 3 instants and sorceries into the guard.
Exactly, yeah. You just make your curves bigger earlier, basically. All right, moving on here. We get, okay, so we get to this pack here.
I took the card that says Learn. So
yeah,
I took the Enthusiastic Study.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because I think Study is okay. One of my problems with Study in Blue-Red is you don't always have a creature early to really use it on. Like, a lot of times in Blue-Red, you're like a 9 creature deck. Right, and then sometimes your creatures are like Prismari Pledge Mages that you're like, well, I guess I cast this pre-attacks to make sure my 3/3 defender can attack, right? So I don't love it in Blue-Red that much, and this is a point where I might just take the Scurried Colony, right? Like, because Scurried Colony is a really premium card, just such an important 2-drop, and I would kind of go, I think instead of walking the line between Blue-Red and Red-White, I would actually be maybe walking the line between Green-Blue and Red-Blue at this point, because I don't think we've seen much white, if you really ask yourself that, right? Yeah. And this Scurried Colony, making it all the way back, is pretty big. Biomathematician's like, whatever, but let's just rewind quickly to this first pack. So this is the pack with Immersion Sequence, Cram Session, Pest Summoning. So people to have taken green cards out of this pack, it's not absurd that this colony is here, but I think at the same time, like, I just think that let's go back to this pack. I'm not as interested in Enthusiastic Study here, just given your cards and given where you are, and I think Colony isn't enough of a good card, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you when you're drafting remember what cards were taken?
Yes. Not all of them, but I tend to. Number one, this pack. Like when I initially looked at this pack, I saw the colony here, and I was like, I recalled, okay, what was in this pack? I remember that there was the sequence, but I didn't really remember the other green cards, right? So, it's tough, right? I think it's a skill you kind of have to develop, where it's just like, once you draft over and over and over again, that like muscle, or sorry, that photographic memory kind of kicks in. But if you're not at that point, just like taking a screenshot of your early picks really helps too, sure. Right? Just being like,
what's gone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I would take the con here. I think this is more of a disagree, though. I think it's fine to take the study, but
yeah. I put it down as a mistake.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, if you wanna be harsh on yourself.
I wasn't.
All right, so we move on. Okay, this is Kelpie Guide coming back around is not too bad. So
and that's what I took because I've played with Culmination of Studies. I took it before, and you gave me an F.
Yeah, not a good one. And you moved the white cards to the board here, which I definitely agree with. As I said, we just haven't seen white cards yet. So And Prismari Pledge Mage Apprentice comes back. Yeah, that's fantastic. Big agree on that. So we've actually got the makings of a pretty good Prismari tempo aggressive deck going on now, right? You know, I think early in the format, a lot of people were trying to do like Prismari as like big spells control, but I don't think it plays very well as a control deck. And I think you really do want to load up on 2-drops and like, you know, tempo plays like Divide by Zero, you know, Heated Debate, just to like get things out of the way. And, you know, Pledge Mage Wheeling is huge too. So, you know, all those things I said about like, oh, there's a colony here, you might want to speculate because we're not sure. That would all go out the window after I saw the Apprentice and the Pledge Mage wheel, right? Because that's just like, you've already got a good lead into blue-red, and those pretty premium cards for your deck came back. So like that would lock me in to just being like, you know what, let's just be blue-red. And yeah, Curate coming back, beautiful. You know, that's great. So I think this is interesting when you talk about this here, just like how to use the wheel. And generally, the way I like to use the wheel is kind of like you did here, actually, where it's not like I'm making gigantic deck swaps from like, oh, this black-white card wheeled, maybe I should be in black-white instead of blue-red. But you were kind of figuring out, you know, should I be in white? Maybe there's a bit of green here. Should I be in blue-red? And I think once you picked up some red-blue cards on the wheel, you put those white cards away. Right? Maybe you even did this subconsciously. I don't know. I'll throw it to you. What was your thoughts when you shelved the white cards? Were you thinking like, okay, now I'm blue-red?
Yeah, well, I said I'm definitely not white.
Yeah.
Well, at this point in the draft, I really wasn't sold on the Stormkiln Artist.
Yeah, that's
so
like
I was
whatever.
Like, and honestly, I don't have any experience with the conspiracy theorist, so I was like, all right, I don't know about that. I could still potentially maybe be blue-green. I don't know. Let's see what we open. Yeah.
And I think the fact that those premium cards came back to me is enough to be like, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, shut off my options and be like, well, I'm never taking a white bomb if I open it back too or whatever. But like, I'm going to be heavily biasing towards a blue and red card, or a blue or red card, the blue and red cards in pack 2. All right, wait to this pack. Thoughts?
So I thought, man, why didn't I open up a cool bomb? I wasn't sold on anything here.
Yeah.
I don't have anything really to get with Solve the Equation. I've used that in Sealed to get Approach. That was great, but like I haven't really ever used it in Draft.
Yeah.
Frost Trickster. Honestly, I haven't had great experience with that particular card. So you mentioned it before, which was interesting. So that was, I haven't had great success with it. But again, I don't have 500 games or 500 drafts under my belt like you. So I was looking at the Spectacle Mage and the Fractal Summoning, and I said, I'll just take the lesson.
Yeah, I think that's totally fine. Especially when you don't really have, you know, I think, you're at 0 lessons? Maybe, you have the Sciences, right?
I have the Environmental Sciences.
Yes, you do that. Yes, you do. I remember that. So yeah, I like just taking your second lesson here. A note on Frost Trickster, like, I think it's another card that people were really high on, right? And then they went, oh, this isn't as good as, you know, as we thought this was, because blue doesn't want to be beat down all that often. And I think, even for myself, I really underrated it for a while. I was just like, oh, I don't want this card in my deck. But I think in this kind of this style of deck you have going on with a lot of good 2-drops, these tempo plays, is the perfect deck for Frost Trickster. The problem with Frost Trickster, despite reading like a great card, is that if you're not playing to end the game quickly, the tapping down, you know, a creature doesn't matter that much. But if you're aggressive, this card's fantastic. So yeah, I would take this Fractal Summoning here just to have a lesson, but Frost Trickster would be a welcome inclusion to this deck for sure. All right, moving on to oh baby, so we opened a good one.
I got past it.
Yeah. Oh, we got past a good one. Yeah, true.
Yeah, so I took that.
Yes. So it's a little weird. It's a little bit at odds with the whole play a bunch of 2-drops and attack you plan, right? Where it's like a great deck based on Mizzix Mastery, I think, is really maximizing on that. It's like a control deck that's like killing all your opponent's stuff, and then it gets to 8 mana, overloads it, basically wins the game, right? That being said, it doesn't clash enough. Like, the other option in this pack is Divide by Zero, and that would be a fine pickup too. But I don't think Mizzix Mastery like clashes with your plan so much. It's not like it's just like this like do nothing card that won't do anything at all. Worst comes to worst, you can cast it for 4 mana and just flash something back out of your grave, right? Mm-hmm. So that's fine too. And then sometimes the game goes long, you draw this on turn 10 or whatever, and you're like, oh, yeah, I just win the game at this point, right? So yeah, great pickup here. You know, in contrast, I wouldn't always play this in like a white-red deck, for example, where you're like more combat tricky, you really want to kill them. But yeah, I think especially when you have just the chance to like sometimes go, oh, okay, I discard my Elemental Masterpiece on turn 2 if you pick one of those up, reanimate it on turn 3, right?
Or like creative outburst, right?
Yeah, or something like that, right? You can just do that sometimes. The opportunities come up a little more often in blue-red, and again, the card just says, I win the game so much of the time when you kick it. So, yep, I'm on board with Mystic Master here, even if it doesn't quite perfectly fit into our, like, tempo shell. All right, moving on.
I just took the Mastery, so I took the Shock.
Yeah, Shock's great. I mean, Shock's just a fantastic card. No complaints there. There's also, like, the Start from Scratch, which is good, too. Study wouldn't, I wouldn't mind a second copy of Study in this deck, but... Yep, can't turn down a Shock. Love it. And so, from your perspective here, I'm curious what you were thinking after you pick up the Mastery. I've been talking about this deck as like a tempo-y aggro deck. I wonder if you, from this point, were thinking what direction you wanted to bring it in. Because I think now we have some, kind of fighting incentives where we kind of want to be controlling. We have the good aggressive 2-drops, though. So, yeah, what were the thoughts going through your head?
I mean, I think if I'm going to be honest, you're talking like the level 2 thinking.
Gotcha.
Like,
yeah.
Like the push and pull of that dynamic. I was just like, I'm Prismari.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally.
And so I don't think, it's probably good to know that I should push myself to think more about that, dynamic. And you'll see as we go on, I do experience that throughout the rest of the draft of like, should I be picking this or should I be picking that? And I think now is when for me, the real learning is going to happen. It's going to be good conversation from here.
Great. And I think this pack is like perfect for talking about that because there's a lot of options here. And it's like, how do you decide which one you want? And the answer is, well, you have to ask yourself, what's your deck trying to do? What's it doing? Is it trying to, pop quiz and like, just draw a bunch of cards? Is it trying to, really, really be aggressive with like sudden breakthrough or something? I think that's really extreme. But like, a card, maybe if there was an enthusiastic setting in this pack, we might want that over these like slower, grindier cards. But yeah, what are your thoughts about this pack?
So I was looking at 4 cards: Negate, Creative Outburst, Pop Quiz, and Elemental Masterpiece.
Right.
We already have a Creative Outburst, so I was like, maybe I should go with the Masterpiece. It makes sense, like with the plan you were talking about before, which is make a treasure and then mastery it out. But I went with the uncommon because previously I figured the uncommons would go first, so the chances of one of the other 3 coming back were greater, so I took the outburst.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point you made about like which one is more likely to come back as your decision maker, basically. And I think I would say that gets used a little bit too often by a lot of players, where it's like, well, this one is more likely to come back. I generally just take, and mind you, you might have just thought this was the best card in the pack for you at the time, but I would just take the best card for me, right?
I wasn't sure whether it was Outburst or Masterpiece, and you could tell me, oh no, it's a different card.
Right. So yeah, let's go rewind then. I would say that Elemental Masterpiece is almost better than Creative Outburst, and I think the first Masterpiece is definitely better than the second Outburst, right? Just because like this just plops down to 4/4s; those end the game quite well, or stabilize you. Where this like doesn't stabilize you that well and doesn't end the game all that well unless they're exactly at 5, which has its it's time and place for it. But I think on average, Elemental Masterpiece is just a better card for most of these decks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would have taken Masterpiece.
It's kind of funny. The thing is, I might have just taken the Negate because Negate's just so versatile in this format. It counters so many things for 2 mana, right? And I think it is the best card in the pack, just in general, and to kind of return to the conversation about like what's going to wheel. I think one of these will wheel, and I would prefer the Masterpiece over the Outburst, but I kind of will take either of them. I'd rather just have the cheaper card, basically the cheaper and still very effective card.
Got it. I have to go back and look, but I feel like there was a masterpiece in pack 1 that did not come back.
I think so. Yeah, I think you're actually right. I remember that. Negate's just very, very good in the format, though. It's close to a premium card. So
I'll put that down as a mistake.
Yeah, I would mark that as a mistake. All right, moving on to the next one. Thoughts?
I took the land.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. If you didn't have the first, if you took the first land the last time, I still think it's a close pick. Like second land over second fractal summoning. That's kind of close for me. But without the first land, you didn't pick up the campus before. Definitely agree on this campus here.
Yeah, and my thought was 2 creative outbursts and the Mizzix Mastery. I'm gonna have pretty mana intensive deck.
Yep. All right,
so another tough pick here. Test of Talents. You just talked about how good counter spells are, and this one you get to see the whole deck, which is tremendous. Removal, Heated Debate. I figured that make more sense for Mizzix Mastery, but I guess what you said earlier was, it's kind of a commodity in this. But I went with that.
Yeah, no. I think this is a very, very close pick. I know I would tank on this pick for a long time. But I think just the fact that this plays well with your, both plans, honestly, with your beatdown plan or your draws that happen to go a little bit later where you're like, maybe looking to kick the mastery, right? Works really well in both those plans, whereas Test of Talents is a little more reactive, going to be fine in those slower hands, but in those hands where you have good 2-drops and like a shock in hand, well, it's going to be fine still. It's probably going to counter something, but you'd probably like just the removal spell to get something out of the way. So, yep, I agree with the bait. Very close pick, though. I love being Test of Talents. Card is really, really good. For all the reasons that
considerations for practical research?
I don't think so. I think it's just, a clunky card draw spell. It's fine. I wouldn't be sad to put it in my deck, but I don't think it's very close to Heated Debate or Test of Talents.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
The next one I actually had trouble with again. Like a lot of interesting choices in this. So Curate is obviously good for digging through everything, and Arcane Subtraction is, we don't really have a lot of learn cards already. I think we only have the Divide by 0.
Yeah. And
then the Prismari Campus is there for fixing. I really wasn't sure, and I ended up just taking the Subtraction for the learn perspective. So this is a ghost drag for you. It's a tease.
I was gonna say. So yeah, I think all 3 of those cards are very close too. There's honestly merits for all of them. The merits for the campus is it's always good to have more fixing. The merits of the Curate are it is a proactive spell to cast to put to trigger Magecraft for your Pledge Mage or your Apprentice or your Quandrix Pledge Mage. Right. It has a bit of a benefit over Arcane Subtraction in that where Arcane Subtraction, sure, you can cast it proactively, but you don't really want to. You don't want to go like, all right, negative for your creature, my creature attacks. Like, it's fine, but it's not that exciting, right? But of course, you are a little bit low on Learn, which nudges you towards wanting to take Subtraction a little bit. I think, if I'm in your seat and I'm thinking I'm probably drafting this as a more proactive deck, I think I do take the Curate, just to have something proactive to act to trigger my Pledge Mages, but it's a very close pick, and I really don't begrudge you taking the Subtraction. So I would say it's a disagree, but a very close disagree.
So I took the Serpentine Curve here.
Yeah,
we talked about it before.
Yeah,
it's strong.
Curve is very strong. Yep, love it.
I took the Spectacle Mage. I wasn't sure, honestly, between that and Solve because we have the
Mastery at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that pick?
Yeah, so I think Infuriate is actually the these 2 cards are in contention for me. Spectacle Mage and Infuriate. I would say Solve because I mostly am not. So if I had a bunch of a lot of shocks or a lot of removal spells, Heated Debates, I'd be in for the Solve the Equation plan because my plan would just be kill other stuff and then find Mastery, right? But I think in this deck, because your plan is more split, where you're play some 2-drops and then curve out and then maybe cast Mastery, I don't think it's worth devoting a card to solve the equation, to put Solve the Equation in your deck because it's going to be awkward in those hands where you have a curve out draw and then you have Solve, right? It's just those 2 don't really match well together. So I do like your Spectral Mage pick. I don't love Spectral Mage. I think it's a fine card, but I do like it when you have the 2 creative outbursts. I think that's a push towards Spectral Mage. playing Spectral Mage. Kind of funny too. It doesn't reduce Mizzix Mastery's cost.
Yeah.
Because it's CMC or mana value, right? So it's
That's a good point. Yeah.
Trips you up a little bit there. And I wouldn't mind Infuriate too with the good 2-drops, especially Conspiracy Theorist, right? Like Infuriate Theorist is nice because they're gonna very much want to block the Conspiracy Theorist, and getting them with a combat trick that usually wins the combat is pretty nice there.
So Infuriate's good in this format? I don't have any experience with it.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful. It's just like a cheap interaction spell. I like it a lot in my red decks that want combat tricks. And I think this deck isn't like, it's not starving for a combat trick, but it would play an Infuriate.
So this was an agree?
Yeah, this is an agree.
Okay.
All right, and we move into the latter half of the pack. It looks like this pod just doesn't like Divide by Zero.
It doesn't look like they like Prismari. You would take Divide by Zero over the Masterpiece back there?
Yes, I would for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So agree on that. We take a lesson here, start from scratch. Yeah, this is close between that and Enthusiastic Study, but I agree. Move on.
We end up getting that Masterpiece.
Get the Masterpiece back. Great. Yep. And you're actually in a nice position where, often if a color pair or a color is open one direction, it won't be open the other. But I think it's actually been open both directions for you. So I think
it really has. Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't think that I did anything exceptional in this draft to end up in Prismari. However, I thought this would be a good draft to go through because I think there were some interesting choices in there.
Well, the thing, you say that, but the thing that you did do well is like you still identified that. You didn't make any like sweeping changes, but we were flirting with white cards at the beginning, and you were
true.
like, let's just go into Prismari, clear those cards wheeled. All right. This pack?
Just to highlight the last two picks there.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, for sure.
We ended up getting a Test
Oh, geez, yeah, Test. I completely missed that. Yeah.
And we ended up getting a Prismari.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Yeah. Fantastic. I breezed through those.
So I went with Negate here.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure between that and the Pledge Mage.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you can see me turning here, like, what's my deck look like? I have no idea. So I went with Negate.
Yep, I agree with that. And I think given your, if I could have drafted this seed a little bit differently, not to say it would have been better or worse, but I think I could have drafted
probably better. Probably better.
Well, I was gonna say, all I was pointing out is that I could draft it as, leaning towards more more aggressive. And I think that if you did draft it that way, leading up to this point, I would probably just want to take the Pledge Mage here, just to have more redundancy of good 2-drops. But now that we're more half and half, I do like the Negate as just the better card, basically, rather than hyper focusing and specializing on I want as many 2-drops as I can.
All right. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this next pick.
Oh, for sure. I can't wait to see it. All right, and next pack we get. Oh, okay, interesting.
I wasn't sure between Kasmina because we have the environmental sciences. I know she's not like an all-star, but we could definitely play her, or Bury, and I took Bury.
Yeah, I completely agree with it. Kasmina is fine, but she's not a card I would splash for. Even in my blue-green deck, sometimes if they're great blue-green decks, I don't actually play her. She's fine, but she's nothing special. And Bury is just a really great interaction spell. So yep, love that. Love that a lot.
That one you can see me really thinking about.
Really tanking. Yeah, you're like, am I passing the Planeswalker? It's kind of funny. In recent sets, in recent years, I would say, I feel like before, when you open a Planeswalker, it's like, oh, that's so good. My deck's gonna be so good now. It's got a Planeswalker. But now it's like, okay, cool. It's a Planeswalker. They've really dialed them back a little bit, which is good, right? I don't think you want to have the busto Planeswalkers all the time. But yeah, I think the mentality, at least for me as a player who's been playing, limited nonstop for 10 years, it's like I had to dial back ooh, it's a Planeswalker, it's so good, when sometimes it's just they're just not all that hot.
Probably be a harder pick in paper in person.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, that factors into it too. All right.
This one I also was curious about. I don't, obviously we have a lot of spells. The Calandrix Pledge Mage is going to be a house there. But what are your thoughts, just as a side, for Teach by Example?
So I like that card specifically when I am in a Serpentine Curve deck. And I think because you have a Serpentine Curve, just because you have a curve doesn't mean you're a Serpentine Curve deck. When I'm saying, when we're talking about a Serpentine Curve deck, I mean a lot of removal spells, right? Your game plan is just cast a bunch of removal, kill your opponent's stuff, and then play an 8/8/9/9 Serpentine Curve. It's really nice to be able to go Teach on 6, Serpentine Curve, make two 9/9s or something like that, right? If you have a lot of cheap removal, which you actually do, it's fine there, but I don't want to put it in my deck like just because I have cheap removal. I want that to be like a reason to put it in my deck on top of having curve, right? So having a curve deck is like a prerequisite basically for me. Okay. You ended up taking Quandrix Pledge Mage here?
The Pledge Mage, but I guess just in full transparency, I was also looking at the expanded anatomy, but I didn't consider it.
I would take that here. I think just again, you have enough of a good aggressive plan here that anatomy would be really, really good, especially on the unblockable apprentice here. And Pledge Mage is fine. Don't get me wrong, but I would just take the lesson.
Okay, so I'll put that as a mistake then.
All right, moving on.
All right, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, so we could go. This is like such the epitome of what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to be like a late game value deck or a beatdown deck?
And I didn't know.
Right.
I didn't feel like I had enough spells to be a pure Cody deck.
Mm-hmm.
But we just took a Pledge Mage.
Yeah.
The pop quiz is also good. I really had no idea, and I don't have any experience with Cody, and I didn't know what the rest of the pack was going to bring, so I took Cody.
I would take the Pledge Mage. I think that's also a mistake. Intro to Annihilation's also in the conversation too. Like I was saying before, I do want one of all of these colorless lessons, but I think you have too many permanents currently to have a good Cody deck. Like too many permanents and not enough lessons, creature lessons, token lessons in the board, which is really what you want for the Cody deck to function, right? Just to go a bit deeper on this, for a good Cody deck to exist, you really want a lot of learn and a lot of lessons so that you can still play creatures in the form of fractal summonings, elemental summonings, but those creatures are spells too, and I don't think you're quite there. And again, you just have a lot of permanents, so I would take the Pledge Mage, just lean more into that beatdown plan.
Okay. So I'll put a mistake there.
Yeah. Moving on.
I took the permanent Torrent Sculptor.
Yeah, I would take expanded anatomy here. Yeah. If you had the first anatomy, I would probably take Sculptor because I do like this card quite a bit, especially just like the versatility of this being a removal spell. But yeah, I think this is a mistake not taking the anatomy.
Just going back to that pick real quick.
For sure.
My thought process for Torrent Sculptor specifically here was we already have 3 really big spells that we can discard to make a treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't the Sculptor like exile the card from your graveyard? So I thought maybe you could make a turn 3 like enormous creature.
Yeah, like a turn 3 6/6 or something, right? That's like kind of hard to target.
Is that a real plan? Is that like a dumb plan?
It's not a dumb plan, but I would say it's like an incidental plan, not one that I would take Torrent Sculptor and make that my plan going into the draft, right? There's certain or going into the games. There's certain opening hands where you're like, you know what? Like I have some good interaction. I have a Divide by 0, a heated debate. I think if I just get the 6/6 down on turn 3, that'll really allow me to push this use my removal spells to push the 6/6 through. But the general plan, I think of like using your big spells to create a treasure, like just giving up a whole card to just bring this out a little bit earlier, even though it's a pretty big creature, I think is generally not worth it. But it's worth considering.
Okay.
All right,
it's
moving
funny
on.
Because it feels like all of this. It feels like this color is like super open, but there's a lot of interest because it's so open. I feel like there's a lot of interesting choices going on in this.
Yeah, you're not just funneled down one path where you're like, okay, take the card for me, you know?
Yeah. I took the lesson here.
Yep.
I
agree with that.
Elemental summon.
Totally. Moving on to this pack, kind of a weak pack, unfortunately for us.
Yeah, I think if you check the video there, I pressed the Alt key to see which one I was missing, like in my collection. Yeah,
so
I took the Hall Monitor because it was the one I was missing from my collection.
No shame there.
So okay, I'll put that as irrelevant.
Another pretty irrelevant pack. Nothing that
I took the Aerialist. Maybe it might make the play.
Sure.
Is there anything?
I don't feel too strongly, but I think you have more than enough playables. Okay, this is a good pack though.
Yeah, there you go. I was looking at the Pledge Mage. I almost took it, but I ended up taking the Snow Day.
I think so too, actually. I think Snow Day is pretty reasonable here when you have like a bunch of creatures that can get in, especially with the Quandrix Pledge Mages. So I like that.
Here I landed on, again, I think it's pretty irrelevant, but the lesson I looked at, but I also was like, oh, the Biblioplex assistant could get something back. I took the assistant. Sounds like you would have landed on the lesson.
I would take the lesson. Yeah, just it's never a bad idea to have more tokens in the board. Yeah.
I'll put that as a mistake.
And
the teach by example wield, so I snagged it.
Nice. And running at the last few packs here, we get the pledge mage and the pop quiz came back around.
I think I could not have made a mistake in this draft from like the wheel perspective.
Yeah, yeah. This is like all the. I think you were probably the only blue-red drafter at this table.
I think so.
I would say
I've never had this experience in my life where I'm like the only of a certain color pair.
Yeah. So let's just talk about that draft then. I think for me the thing that stands out is having a plan in mind. So when you have those choices to make, those tricky choices, you kind of know which way to lean, right? Yeah. And it's not even like you have to have too much prerequisite knowledge of like, well, I have these cards, so that really makes me want to be aggressive or defensive. I mean, that helps. But I think if you just choose one, if you're just like, I should be aggressive here or I should be defensive here, obviously looking at your incentives, like if you have a mastery or if you have just a lot of good 2-drops, that will guide you. But if you just choose one direction to go in, you can't go too wrong, I would say. The trouble you can get yourself in is when you just go here and there, right? When you're trying to when you're just like, you're not putting your foot down, basically, right? Yeah. But if you just choose one direction to go in, I think you'll generally end up in a good place.
That's a good segue to, I think I would really like to talk through the deck building on this because I struggled because I was of two minds in terms of, am I a Mizzix deck, Cody deck, or, I have all these pledge mages. What the heck should I build here? And then just to recap, even though that felt like it was going really well from an agree mistake perspective, our actual one from last episode had less mistakes. Last episode, I think we had 18.8% mistakes. This time we had 21.6%. So
yeah, that's interesting. So I think what happened was we were on board.
Pack 3 killed me.
Pack 3, yeah. Well, I think we were on board with the lane you're supposed to be in, but not on the micro of what the deck wanted, right? All right, so why don't we look at the build then? All right, so here is our build here. Kind of sleek, kind of a nice looking deck actually. Just take a look at what this is your initial build. The cards you left on the board that are of note: Snow Day, Conspiracy Theorist, which I have to have a start talking with you, Nathan, if you left Conspiracy Theorist on the board, and Kelpie Guide and Enthusiastic Study. So just thoughts on the build. First and foremost, what are you thinking?
So going back to like of being two minds, am I aggressive? Am I not? I thought I was going to lean more heavily into the Mizzix Mastery spell, like just stay alive until I can nuke them or do whatever I can do there. So that's the reason the Conspiracy Theorist is in the board. It read to me as more of an aggro card. So that's why it's in the board. Cody, I didn't make the cut because as we were talking about, I don't think that I had the spell density. It felt like I had too many permanents. I wasn't really sure. But my gut check said too many permanents. Those are probably the two notable decisions that I felt like I made.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing about Conspiracy Theorist is that it's just like a 2-mana 2/2 that can attack and block or trade off if you really need it to. And the times when they just go, all right, you're on the play, you go land, they go land, you go land Theorist, they go land nothing. You get a free hit in, and sometimes you get to cast just a free Curate, right? Just go like discard the Curate, cast it. Or, you get to cast a free Prismari Apprentice, right? Another great thing about Conspiracy Theorist is if you have a Learn card and you don't have anything you want particularly in your board, you just discard one of the cards in hand, right? You go Learn, rummage away, I don't know, an Apprentice, and then just go, okay, cast that one instead, right?
So it's not an attack trigger?
It's not an attack. It's whenever you discard one or more non. Yeah, exactly.
All right. So this is just me not knowing the ins and outs of the cards. So this is just like, I feel like this is like we were talking before the recording. This is like a Kaldheim card to me. There's just so much text. I didn't even think. I didn't think about the interaction of this with not choosing a lesson card with Learn.
Yeah. So this is like the one I feel very strongly about. I would put in the deck, and I'm not exactly sure that I would take out just yet. But that's what I feel. I definitely want that in. Snow Day is the other one that I think you're right not to put Cody in. I think it's close, to be fair. I think you could run Cody here, but I personally wouldn't. Snow Day's the other one where I'm like, I probably want that in this deck just because you have triple Quandrix Pledge Mage and like Prismari and Apprentice, like these aggressive cards, right? Now, are there cards I would want to take out? Is the question. I think probably you don't.
Spectacle Mage, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, Spectacle Mage is kind of okay because you have these guys up here and you have Burying Books, which is good. I think I would probably be in the market for cutting. Yeah, Spectacle Mage is on the lower end of cards, but I think just like Practical Research is my number one, just as like expensive card that doesn't affect the board. You already have card advantage cards and divide, like I guess Divide by Zero is not true card advantage, but like, you know, card velocity cards, right? And like Arcane Subtractions card advantage, basically like card advantage that doesn't cost you a full turn to be like cast my card, draw spell, right? If you were full on like a bunch of removal spells, bunch of heated debates, bunch of shocks, I like this card a lot better because you can just survive the early game. You can be like kill that, kill that, kill that, draw, refill, and then I can win from there. But you're not so much that deck. You're like want to play a 2-drop, want to play a 3-drop deck, right? And if you're facing another want to play a 2-drop, want to play a 3-drop deck, well, you're just gonna fall behind on the turn that you draw 4 cards here, right? So I think this isn't like well suited for your deck. It's a fine card, but I think, you know, Conspiracy Theorist is definitely a better card for your deck, and I think Snow Day plays a similar role, but it affects the board, right? Gives you a little bit of velocity and taps two things down. So I think if I were to change this, I would take the Practical Research out, and I think probably just Strategic Planning would be my other one that I would take out.
Okay.
Just as like a, you know, it's fillerish. It's good with the curves, good with Miz Mastery, but yeah, just still kind of like fillerish.
And what about? I don't know that I got your thoughts, or if I missed it. What about the Storm Kiln Artist? Like, we have a lot of spells. We're gonna make a lot of treasures.
Yeah, I tend not to, like, I bias towards not playing this card generally. Just like, this one. I generally just don't play this card very often. It's just so fragile, right? Yeah, like, it's a 4-mana 2/2. Yeah, and it's like, you know, sometimes you really go off with it, but the times you don't, it's just horrendous. So yeah, I don't like it very much here.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, but the build's not bad. You know, it's mostly there, I would say.
You want to upgrade the curve, synergy, and mana?
Yeah. So mana's great. I mean, the mana base is good. You've got 2 campuses. I give you a 10. Nothing, you know.
First 10 ever.
Yeah. I would say that curve-wise, yeah, you've got a good curve going on. Maybe I'd like... It's kind of weird because I think this bleeds into synergy a bit, where I would want different cards on the 2 and the 3-drop slot if you were being more controlling, or if you're leaning more aggressive, I would want different cards up here. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's more the synergy thing. I think curve-wise, where you're actually your mana values lie is good. So I'd give that about an 8. Synergy-wise, that's where I think you could do, you know, we could improve a little bit, just not being so here and there. So I'd give synergy, you know, a synergy like 6, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And thoughts about the build overall?
I think this is I've only played one game with this, so for full transparency, I lost to the what is the Lorehold 4/5 who makes spirits?
Oh, Hoffrey, yeah.
Yeah. That just ran me over.
Yeah, it's a pretty silly card.
But I'm really excited about finishing it. I think it looks like a fun deck to play.
Yeah. If anything, you know, these Prismari decks are definitely very fun. I enjoy playing them, even if they're not the absolute like best decks in the format or anything.
Yeah, I try not to get too attached to the results of the gameplay because, like, I mean, I know we have segments where we talk about where I made mistakes, but I mean, I like to focus just on, like, did I do the draft right? Did I build it right? And then there's gameplay, and I feel like this draft went okay.
Yeah, no, I'd say so too. Far from a train wreck.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way, you know. All right, so let's just wrap things up then, Nathan. Some overall thoughts on today's draft / deck build here. Do you have any takeaways you think for yourself?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway, and I think I probably said this, I don't remember exactly what I said at the end of the last episode, is it seems like I'm still not paying enough attention to lessons. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, it comes up. I think most of my mistakes that you flagged were in the draft portion associated with that. So I think before our closing episode for season 2, I need to really up my lesson game. I need to learn my lesson, if you will.
And one thing too is that, you know, because I think everybody else has learned that lesson, they're just harder to get. You don't get learn cards or the lesson cards for free anymore, right? That you really have to take them when you see them, or else the other people are just going to take them, and you're not, you know, the good ones don't wheel anymore, right? We're far past that part of the format. So yeah, definitely prioritize them when you see them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how this plays out, and we'll check back in on this on the next episode.
Awesome. All right, let's wrap it up. Nathan, thank you so much. Viewers out there, thank you so much for tuning in as well, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye, guys.